Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Waking Up the Tools Edition 2, Episode 2, in which my friend and colleague, Coach Andrew Moss, and I chat about some important tools that we co developed as I was becoming the person who could solo hike across Northern England back in 2023. Um, the reason it's called Waking Up the Tools is because I wrote about these tools in the book that I wrote about this experience of becoming that person who could do that and then doing the hike and then all the fun that happened afterwards when I was integrating back into my life. And I want to say welcome to you, Andrew Moss, for being here too. Like, hello.
Hi, hey, it's great to see you again, and thanks for the invitation for round two.
Yeah, yeah. We are recording this so we're recording it in a software called Riverside, and it is being hosted in LinkedIn as a LinkedIn Live. So if you're here live, hello. We would love to hear your questions and your thoughts as we're going through. And I also want to say a huge, huge thanks, first of all, to Jeff Lamb, who is doing the moderating and encountering the stuff and bringing us through it with such good heart. So thank you, Jeff. Um, and also to pathfinders.social for hosting us because that's where this is. And we're very super grateful for that. Yeah, I think it's time to say what tool I want to bring into this conversation today. Uh, and that is the amplifier.
Hmm.
um, when I say those words, Andrew, when I talk about the tool called the amplifier, what comes up for you?
Oh, well, thanks, and I love the fact that we do these unscripted and live, because I literally can respond to the question you just asked in a very honest way. So, what comes up for me is actually two sides, and it's interesting. You just mentioned Pathfinders as our host. Pathfinders is, I'm part owner of the business. So amplifier for me has two meanings. One is on the positive side is really what Pathfinders is all about, which is amplifying the stories, taking a story that has a certain size and volume to it and amplifying it so that more people learn about it, more people get exposed, and that it carries more impact potentially to reach people that really need to know about it. And so that's when we go to a concert or when we play our guitar and we plug it into an amplifier, it's taking a positive uh, piece of energy and expanding it, right? It's making it more accessible, louder, farther
Mm,
reach. Well, unfortunately for humans, the same is true when the energy is a negative energy or when it's our thought patterns. And in the context of our conversation today, Amplifier was used as a tool to kind of think about the thoughts that we all have as we go through our day, that are not necessarily thoughts that are serving our well being. There'd be questions about ourselves and how we might look to the outer world. It might be questions about our relationships with other people. All of these, sort of constant chatter that goes on in our mind. Uh, Left alone, those pieces of thought have a very short lifespan and tend to move on and be replaced by new thoughts. Um, the provision being if left alone.
mm,
If given attention to, um, we can linger in them. And we all do that. We linger in a thought and consider it, um, and that's okay, and that's probably necessary as a human. But as long as you can then release it. But the amplifier is just like the music amplifier. Is when we take one of those thoughts that we're lingering in and plug it into the amplifier and make it into something much bigger than that its original intention might have even considered, or that
mm,
that it might have even represented. And I think often in our lives we fall into this pattern of an incident or an event or a comment or something happening that we then attribute all of these other things to, which is really just the amplification of a thought that left alone would have moved on, or even if we had just considered it in a calm and quiet sort of acoustic way,
Mm-hmm.
it would only have carried a certain amount of resonance for us. But when you plug that plug into the amplifier, you turn it to 11, like the good old Spinal Tap days, it can become this all-consuming thing that then takes over our life for as long as the plug is still plugged in. And in the context of our work together, my observation was from time to time there would be things that happened in your life that seemed to be getting amplified. And I think I reflected to you once that either I have a very boring life or you have an extraordinarily noisy and eventful life. Um, and I was curious about that. And I think what came out of that conversation was a reflection that actually we probably both had the same number of events and things going on in our life, but the extent of amplification might have been the thing that I was noticing was different. And so that's where it came from.
May I read that section from the book?
Sure.
There is right. This is Waking Up, the book. Um, it is about how I grew to love my body and myself while solo hiking across northern England. And the fun thing about writing this was I was able to go back through our messaging, Coach Andrews at the time and mine, and um, see things from a bit of a perspective, get a little bit of distance on it, and what emerged were these tools that we're talking about each month. There's a whole chapter called "Tools That Have Been Helpful for Me," and one of them is tool 3 in the book is the amplifier. So I wrote this. One time, Coach Andrew and I had the following conversation. A. I'm curious about how you amplify your experience of life, perhaps a topic for a future conversation. K. I'm genuinely curious what you mean, amplify. A. I think it's a common word and I use it with its known definition. K. Like loud, noisy? A. Like taking an input of a certain size and outputting something larger. K. I was thinking amplifiers. Too many concerts. A. Amplifying a thought? K. LOL. Sounds like my whole life. See what I did there? My whole life was lived constantly under threat of over amplification. A reflection like the one above on how I might make input from the world bigger than it is was blown up into here's someone who thinks I am loud and noisy. When something happens, call that input of a certain size, which causes me to feel upset or angry or guilty or fearful, it grows into a very loud clanging in my head. Understanding that I have this amplifier in me has given me a wonderful way of observing what's really going on in here. With this understanding comes an ease of living. I return to alignment within myself much more quickly and with far less fuss than ever before, now that I understand my inner amplifier. And something that came up as I was incorporating this tool in myself, so that was in sort of early 2023, I think, was one of our kids was becoming a sound engineer at the time. And he took, when I would share about this amplifier, right, he took that as only negative. He was like, he, he, he kept advocating for the amplifier as a neutral tool that you could use to make things loud if you wanted. You could turn it down if you wanted. Um, you could use to as you chose. And I loved because he was speaking of music, drums, bass,
Mm.
amplifying vocals, those sorts of things. And and I just love the neutrality of it, you know, which makes me think, Andrew, about what you were referencing at the very beginning. Like there's a very positive amplifier, meaning choose the signal that you wish to make louder and then do that, right?
Mm.
And then the idea that if we're not aware of it, it can wreck our lives because we don't understand what is happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have, uh, some of the peers in the coaching industry that I've been influenced by, say words like, we have the most amazing special effects department in our mind that can take an input of a certain thing and turn it into the most amazing motion film that you've ever seen without any necessary supporting evidence needed. It's just all special effects. And, I think every single person listening to this conversation can think about a time when one event, and that could be, like I said, a comment or an experience or whatever, but that one initially small thing, we turned it into something much bigger, only to find out later that it wasn't anything like what we had created in our mind. It was something completely different. It might have been just a complete accident or mistake by somebody. But
Mm,
then we end up living in the energy of whatever that motion picture of our mind was, until we get evidence to prove otherwise. And a lot of people live their lives in that state of watching and experiencing the events around them, and creating, amplifying them into much larger things. And for whatever reason, people are more tendent to do that with negative things, it seems, than the positive things that go on in their life. And you know it's easy to brush the positive things off as like, well, yeah, that's nice, but I'm sure there's something that's going to come and get me around the corner kind of attitude. I've just never found that was actually true. I think that if you live in, I mean, the ultimate state of presence is a presence to just noticing the events and the the things that are going on, the thoughts that you're having, the energies that might be showing up in your body, just noticing them without the need to go and chase them uh, any further. And or at the very least to actually give it, as your son brilliantly said, give it the benefit of neutrality and dig into it out of curiosity to learn more about where it came from,
mm,
so that if an event happens that could easily be turned into a negative, if you gave yourself the benefit of a pause to just say, well, let me actually get to the bottom of what's really going on here before I have an emotional response or allow myself to enter an emotional space about this. And I think that little pause is sort of where presence, allows us to live in a much more neutral state and sort of a more considered state, that those things that are happening, yes, they're happening, but they don't have any meaning and not really much energy unless we give attention to them.
mm. Um, has there been a time in your life where there was an amplifier going on in your head?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't remember if I can't remember what I said on the last call, but yeah, I mean, there was a time in my early in my business career where I had yeah, like a consulting company, and one of our big clients um, ended their contract with us very quickly, and my emotional response, or my response to it, was amplified many many times over, because I had, first of all, didn't really spend much time considering the other party's side of this, like the rationale for this decision. And then I allowed that to turn into then sort of an emotional response to the impact of that decision on a lot of other people that were important in my life. And so that just sort of snowballed and snowballed. And there was many, many, many opportunities along the way for me to have just noticed and chosen a different path of how to deal with the fact, which was just a fact, which was that we would need to find some new customers and some new clients. Um, but I turned it into something much bigger than that.
Mm,
And then right now I'm in the middle of an event with my daughter, which I've noticed is eliciting a little bit of an emotional response as well, which is, a decision has been made by her university that has a significant impact on her life. And it, by the assessment of me and several other people that have been involved, that the decision was not made in good faith for the people being impacted, nor in a way that showed much empathy or care for the impact. And so our response to that has, definitely had an amplifier plugged into it,
Mm.
because we feel a responsibility that other people also are aware that this university that in question actually, may not be trustworthy of their children's, care, of our children's care, in the way that we had hoped that it might be. And that's unfortunate, but it's important that it be shared and other people be aware of it. And so I could, from time to time, mainly when I'm writing a little bit of a rant about the information we're learning about this whole experience, that, I find myself getting caught in that. But the good thing, and this is where being a coach and learning how to apply it to yourself comes in, is I can recognize that, and I still have the choice to still move into that and allow that energy to then inform how I'm going to write or how I'm going to share my feelings about this situation. So it's
Mm.
not that we lose the ability to choose, it's actually that we gain the ability to choose and can go into the energies that suit the moment, and also can stand back from the energy that's not very helpful.
Oh, I love that you said that. It's as if like the vision that I had of you is you've got this amplifier in your head and you're taking in information and it is getting so loud that it's really hard to hear or understand what's true and what is emotion. And the ability to kind of step outside of that or take a different perspective and just be curious about what comes up when you pause.
Mm, yeah,
um, that then allows you to understand what is true and what is, you know, being amplified in a way that isn't accurate.
yeah. Well, and like any good amplifier, there's usually a dial on them as well, right? And so even noticing when I'm caught up in the emotion of this situation, I have the choice to turn the dial down from 11 to 2,
Mm-hmm.
right? And be okay with the energy of frustration and, disappointment towards, individuals involved, or the institution involved. Um, and even that really helps modulate sort of my experience of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think the key thing that we're talking about is to understand that you do have separation from the the events that are going on, and or at least that's our ambition in life, is to have separation from the events that are going on, including our thoughts and the
Mm-hmm.
events around us, so that we can make the choices of how we want to amplify or not amplify them, and to what extent we want to, or to what extent we just want to let them be and let them go by and move on with our day, and knowing that there's going to be new energies and new thoughts that emerge, as we do. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is all really pointing back to the same core idea, which is that when you understand that we are separate from those thoughts and emotions and patterns, we are also then empowered to choose what to do when we notice that we're having them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the amplifier was a recognition that, um, you can pull the plug out. Like if you notice that you're not feel loving the energy that you're having about an event, you can pull the plug out and just let it be for a while. Step away from it. Stop being as involved in it, and then it's amazing how it just sort of dissipates on its own.
Mm. Um, so much comes up for me, like when you talk about that. Because, so I don't know what your experience of it is, but my experience has been that the way to unplug it, I guess, isn't really to unplug it or take any action. It is simply to see that it's on and that it's just notice and observe what's going on here. So, for example, we are having, I want to be really mindful, we are having some home improvements being done to our home. And we received information 2 nights ago at about 9 o'clock at night uh, that the cost of these was going to be roughly double what I had envisioned, in my wildest dreams. And I could see the amplifiers get plugged in and turn on, and I could understand, having done this. Like, I think that's something else that I really wanted to say and make clear too. Um, I am a person who basically had zero awareness of any internal mechanisms. I just lived in it, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea that my experience was what I now do understand it as, which is to say, just as you say, I can hear some different things in here. I know that I'm not that amplifier. I am the observer of that amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Somewhere in here is a being, and it's me who's observing everything. Just like I'm not my hair, I'm not an amplifier, right? I'm not my thoughts. And so at first it was pretty disorienting to when I was just gaining that awareness, and really that thing that I read that day that we were having that conversation was really the first time that it ever occurred to me that there could be something inside me that would make things louder than they really were, than the facts of the, what was said or communicated were. And and then that's several years ago now, right? So, like, the ability to understand that means that now what I can do is I can remember that, like, for example, I can take a breath. I can feel my lungs expanding. I can put my hands together and I can feel one hand against the other hand, right? Like, or any of these are some really, what's something that's been helpful for me is these meditative tools. Um, and just even learning them has been really, really helpful to to see and hear the amplifier, instead of being pulled into the music in a way that feels trapped or stuck. And so I could take this information in. I could continue running the bath that I was running. I could just hear these thoughts and be okay. And so I was curious because my experience of this whole amplifier usage, knowledge, whatever, has been that emotions really have a half life. Like, I can say, okay, it's time to be done with this now, right? I can say that in my brain, but my body may have a different opinion on it. And it will give that opinion in the information of my heart racing or my stomach feeling the way that it feels, right? And that's, again, positive or negative. Like, it doesn't it's the same body like experiencing, so it will have the same mechanisms. It's just what my brain is thinking about them. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe that's a little too esoteric, but my curiosity for you, Andrew, was, do you do you experience your amplifier that way, that for example, that you understand that it's going to just take time, the time it takes for the emotions to quiet down, or do you see it differently?
No, I definitely see that, and I definitely agree with you that trying to talk yourself into letting go of things is not terribly helpful because you're actually refocusing on the very thing that you want to just sort of have drift away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will say that I think, and I think in all of these conversations around the power of our mind and our thoughts and our consciousness, we can't forget that our bodies are a significant factor in our ability to be at our highest, most conscious state. And so the knowing that actually when our bodies are well rested and well nourished and in a good state, that our minds tend to also then be operating at near their best. The other side of that conversation is that our bodies are actually a great tool to allow the mind to calm down. And so whether that's going for a walk, having, a cup of tea, or going for having a nap, I once heard somebody say, the best solution for everything in life is to have a nap, and it's probably true. And but for me, um, especially as I'm working through the day and got a lot of things on the go and lots of inspiration and problems to solve and opportunities, I find that you know around mid afternoon for me, I go for a walk, or I go to the gym, or I do both. And by the time it maybe takes the first 10 or 15 minutes, um, I'm not consciously trying to stop my mind from thinking, but 10 or 15 minutes in, I notice that, oh, it's all of a sudden got very quiet around here, as in quiet in here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can really enjoy the rest of that experience of walking or at the gym. And so, I think a lot of people in this around this topic focus solely on the mind and the thoughts creating our experience of life, but our bodies are connected. And so I think it's really important that we position all of this to say, if you're finding that your mind is racing all the time and not in a helpful place, so often just as important that you also check in with how well you're taking care of your body side of things and your the biology and the chemistry side of things, because those two things are definitely having some interplay. And so, yeah, I agree with what you said. And I would say that I think understanding that our moving our bodies and using our bodies, and some people have the little home trampoline and they just go bouncing on the trampoline, or whatever it might be for each person, something that gets your biology and your chemistry changing, can be a really good tool to just turn the knob down on the amplifier a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of really creative and fun ways to do that. I'm looking at the painting that's right behind me. When I made that, I was standing at my easel and I had, I believe, like a playlist in Spotify called Groovy 70s Music cranked. Like,
Hmm.
and my kids laugh at me because it's fun to, I can say that in a very happy, positive way because like they think it's hilarious how I paint. I am a full body painter. And when I spend 15 minutes making or an hour, right, or whatever the time is,
Hmm.
I inevitably come out of those with just a completely reset perspective. The amplifier has turned off for me,
Hmm.
and things will come up that I can then hear and go, oh, that's what that was. So, for example, with this home improvement, what I had perceived as a challenge, first of all, I now understand as um, it's an invitation to be creative and how might we pay for this, and secondly, such an appreciation for the people who will be doing that work. Like we are so fortunate to be able to have this experience, and um, I was not thinking that way when I first received that news. And so what's happened is as the emotions have settled out, and as you say, as I have done the self-care, um, that feels good and also results in this nice mind body connection. Um, things have felt a lot better with that. Things are moving in a great direction for it.
Hmm.
And like, what comes up in my mind to say about this is, if I can do this, literally anyone can do this. I was so far away just a few years ago from the ability and the understanding of this. Like if you're watching or listening and you're like, well, I could never do that. Oh, she meditates, I could never do that, right? Like you can. It's a little bit of a shift and an opening with courage, I think, to try something different, you know.
Hmm. Okay, I'm curious about the home improvement project, and just for clarification on something you said earlier.
Mm.
Had you been provided with information from the people who are going to do the work on an initial price and then it doubled, or was it your expectation versus the quoted price that was double?
Yeah, I love the question. It was 100%, and I had been super curious, like, is the number that I have in my head going to have any relation to the number that comes back?
Mm,
Because this was our first understanding of what this would cost. So it's definitely the second
mm,
thing that you said, where I had no frame of reference. I was just curious, and even with those, it just completely blew away what I thought it might be, which
sure.
caused the amplifier to turn on. You know.
Yeah. And that's my observation of what um, tends to trip the amplifier on for a lot of people is actually expectations
Mm.
uh, that people carry around. And then when they see something that's in contrast to those expectations, it just like, for some reason, that flips the amplifier on and creates a reaction to it.
Mm.
And I mean, that can be all kinds of things, right? I mean, it could be the way, like we've all seen that, the little kid meltdown at the shopping center, at the store, right? And, like it's easy to have an expectation that that parent should have a better control of their kid until we remember that, like for those who've got kids, that, yeah, that's not always actually the easiest thing to do, right? And
Mm.
so, but those, like, we walk around with this programming that we've developed through our life that is really just a set of rules and expectations of the way things are supposed to be, the way people should drive, the way people should signal, the way people should ride their bikes on the side of the road, like everything. We have our way of what we think it should be like, and then it's so easy to then get caught up in terms of a reaction to something that falls outside of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a great example. And it's sort of the reason I wanted to point back to it to say, like, there's a circumstance where we create our own moments of suffering because we're carrying an expectation instead of like just an open curiosity about what might come to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that can lead us to then linger in this sort of like negative energy for longer than we need to.
And if I think about what those feelings were, I think to your point, I felt like an idiot because I had thought that this was going to be so much less than it was, and I had fears about how will we pay for this, and like they were such the individual emotions can be very different things for people, and it just I think it's really interesting how different people experience the amplifier, which actually that makes me want to bring up something else that feels relevant to the conversation. So I was like probably about a year ago, I was in conversation with a friend of mine who's who has a completely different view of like their internal workings. And what they said to me was, I don't have an amplifier. I have like a de-amplifier. So when something comes in that is, triggering, I shut down completely. I feel nothing. And I wanted to bring that into the conversation because I found it so fascinating to speak with them about it. But I also was curious what you would make of that.
Well, I think every person's going to have a different experience, but I think there's a difference between de-amplifying could be a very good thing if you're noticing that you're caught up in something that's not helpful or that's maybe like over the top reaction to something, and you can modulate it down to a more manageable level. So there's that, which I think we all need that ability
Mm.
to recognize what's going to notice the warning lights and then turn some dials down, right? Um, but then there's also sort of a delusional aspect of where that can go of just ignoring, and again, this is language, right? So, if de-amplifying is actually more a case where you're just ignoring things around you that really do warrant some attention or could benefit from your um, looking at it,
Mm.
then I think that that's not necessarily a very healthy thing, right? And so I just think that the ultimate, if we're going to talk about the ultimate place to try to get to with this, is really just to learn to be much more tuned in to the early stages of when these things start to happen. Good, good energy and not so good energy, and then to be more, to be conscious about it and present and ability to then choose what you're going to do with it. And look, like sometimes the warning light's going been on for 5 minutes before you notice, right? Sometimes it's like a second or two in and you can tell that it's been on, right? And then there's nothing wrong with that, but it's once you know that there are those warning lights there and you can recognize when they're on, the ability to then realize that that thing you're looking at doesn't really have um, any energy to it until you start creating a whole narrative around it. And I think the more we can learn to not build the narrative and open up the special effects department to go after it, the more we can just stay present to it and recognize, well, yeah, that happened. You know, I don't know why it happened. I'm curious, so maybe if I'm curious, I can go find out, ask a few questions, um, or I can say, you know what, it's actually not that important. I'm just going to let it go. I mean, like we all know the sort of road rage traffic scenarios, and you think about the times where you've gotten consumed by some of that, and it's like to what benefit, you know, like really, like first of all, you have no idea what the other person might be dealing with in terms of how they're driving, but it also, they're going to potentially do harm to themselves, hopefully not others, but potentially. But the reality is, like, what can you do about that from where you're sitting in your car, and why consume yourself with rage around that? So I mean, that's a common one that most humans have experienced, but we do it all the time to ourselves. And so yeah, I wouldn't judge somebody that de-amplifies in any positive or negative way, but I would say that there's different ways to turn the dial. And if you're turning the dial consciously with intention and with awareness of what you're doing, that's great. If you're turning it down because you just don't want to deal with it, then that's not really living in a conscious state. That's sort of living in a more of a delusional state.
And you know where they landed in that conversation was, I'm not good at advocating for myself or others when the amplifier is off. Like when I'm de-amplifying, that they saw that as the same mechanism but in the reverse direction as when something gets super amplified. So it's just what you're saying, like having an awareness of what you're doing. And then it's really interesting that you bring that up about road rage, because you're right, everybody does have, I'm sure everyone watching or listening has stories about that. The one that came up for me was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I was dropping a kid off at a thing, and I mean, the what happened was I turned right. I looked and then I turned right, and someone came out, to my perception, came out of absolutely nowhere, where they were right on my butt. They were honking and, you know, all the
Mm-hmm.
arms and everything like that. And I felt terrible because I had looked and I just didn't see them, right? So we had, for the universe arranged it so that, like, a couple hundred feet later, we are stopped at a stoplight. I'm going left, so I'm in the left lane. She is uh, going straight, so she's in the right lane. And I put my window down, like the passenger window,
Mm-hmm.
and so she put hers down, and I said, I am so sorry. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
you could see, as she was turning to me, you could see her being like, oh, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And it ended up, we had enough time for each to make sure that the other was okay. And it was so, like, it just restored my faith in humanity a little bit, because, like, when you can be in such high emotions and then you can really come to a compassionate understanding of each other, like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Often don't get that opportunity um, to 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 check the story that we've created for accuracy. We
Yeah.
tend
Yeah.
to linger in it much longer than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a great conversation. I've looked in LinkedIn before just to see if there were any
Mm,
questions, and so I didn't see any at the time. But what I'll say is, if you're watching live and you have a question, drop it in. And in the meantime, what I kind of wanted to do was to review the last one that we talked about a little bit because it's been so interesting. In our first tool chat, we spoke of minding my own business. That was the first tool that we talked about, and uh, we had given homework, you know, and the homework that you, Coach Andrew, basically gave was really in two directions. One was literally minding our own business, and the other was around. If I remember, do you remember what it was?
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other was thinking about our goal setting um, in a sort of two-layer approach. One sort of the state of being, the state of feeling, the state of emotion that we would like to to be in, um, on top of sort of the actual material out, output of that goal. Because I think a big part of your story is that we didn't focus, or at least for my part of it, was not to focus on the physical training, the walking across England outcome. My focus for you was on how to have you in a state every day that would enable you to do the things that you would need to do to achieve the goal that you had.
Hmm.
But for me, to try to apply a training plan to walking across England would have completely missed the point of what needed to change and transformation. So, transformation, like when we talk about that, transformation is the process that allows the outcome to happen. It's not the outcome. Transformation isn't the outcome. The transformation is the ability to then unlock ourselves to live in a new way, to see the world in a new way, to have a different relationship with ourselves and with others, to imagine that we're capable of things that we wouldn't have considered before. All of that is the transformation experience. The output of that is that we just are open to trying things that we might not have considered possible for ourselves before. And that even happened through your walk, right? That you had a
Hmm.
transformation of experience of how fast or how far you could go in a day, right? Like that evolved as you let go and chose a different state of curiosity and potential to start your day with. And so, yeah, I mean, those were the two things we focused on last week. And this, the amplifier certainly builds upon that, because the amplifier is sort of, constantly around us and has the ability to kind of drop these road bombs in front of us when we're navigating. It's like, wow, like this, I got a phone call out of nowhere, or I got an email, or somebody said something to me in a funny way, and now I'm all caught up in that. My whole day has gotten blown up. Well, that's not necessary if we're actually operating from a state of like calm and peaceful and sort of present state. And we notice those things, and that's part of the reason that I introduced the three feeling states for you as sort of the foundational piece. Was if we started from that place, then I suspected that you would notice when you went into your old ways more quickly, or more, you would notice it, right? And then you would catch yourself, and then we could of course adjust and come back to the midline and start again, right? And so, yeah, I think those two things from last week or last month were a great place to start the conversation. And again, the amplifier is something that people will definitely be able to relate to in their own lives and see how they do it. And they've probably also been witness to other people doing it to them. As in your
Hmm.
case, like you didn't mean to create a near accident situation, but this lady in the other car might have, assumed you were just a terrible driver and inconsiderate and all the until you had a chance to sort of course correct her as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so with the minding my own business, or with that tool, and then the homework from that tool, I have just gotten some beautiful feedback from people, and
Mm,
I think it's been really fun. One of my favorite things about these, and I didn't know that was going to happen until we did that last week or last month, was to say, hey, here's some homework. Like, here's something that you can work on if you want to. So thank you for everyone who has gotten in touch with me just to say, how they're doing with it. I've been sharing like little snippets from the conversation out into Facebook, into Instagram, and into LinkedIn. And I'd love to continue hearing from people who are getting some kind of value from this. And I know I have an aspect of the amplifier that I'd love to offer for homework. And Andrew, I wondered if you did too.
I certainly can, but I'd love to hear what yours is first.
Yeah. So mine is um, for someone to be really curious about, you know, where, like, is my amplifier plugged in right now? Is it, what's the volume level that it's at? And really just noticing, and being able to understand the difference between when it's on or off, and then when it is, at what volume is it at. And I would just be super curious. I can remember in our work together, there were times where I would say to you, my amplifier is at 11. And then a couple days later, I'd be like, okay, now it's down to about 4.
Mm,
Like, you can feel these things sort of. And the noticing to me is so interesting, because it seems like the noticing is what helps me, at least, and the people that I work with, be able to make choices. It's the simple noticing. So anyway, that's Coach K saying, if you observe your amplifier and just notice where it's at, you know, and let us know. I would love that. So, or at least take notes for yourself.
mm, cool. Yeah, well, mine, I'm going to take the sort of different perspective, but sorry, the same perspective, but from a different angle.
Hmm.
And this goes for actually all the tools. And we didn't mention this last week. But when you start to be sort of aware of these tools and aware of sort of the operating system that we all have with our mind, um, it's great self-care. It's great to work through this for ourselves, but the awareness is also applied to everybody else. And this is a piece that people seem to forget sometimes, which is, if we understand that we often get caught up with our amplifier turned way too high, plugged in and way too high, and we are more conscious about that, then we can also apply that conscious awareness to the way other people are behaving around us and the way other people are dealing with situations. And we can have less of a reaction to it and more of just an empathy and an understanding that, oh, they must be going through an amplifier moment right now
Mm-hmm.
because of the way that they're responding to the circumstances that they're dealing with. And just having that awareness and empathy for that can be really, really powerful. So
Wow.
it's the homework being just give other people the same grace that you're going to give yourself from having this understanding. And that alone will probably have you experiencing less of your own amplifier noise, because you're going to recognize that other people are going through a human experience just like you are. And they're not going to be any more perfect than you are in going through yours. And just giving them that understanding is a really helpful thing.
Love it. Love it. That's amazing. So we've really got understand what's going on inside of ourselves as homework, and see how that understanding applies with the people that you come into contact with, and what might their inner state be
Yeah.
that you can observe from your place of center.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, um, What an awesome conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah, yeah. And we will be back on April let me see what day of the actual month that is. April the 10th will be our Waking Up Tools 3. And, until then, I'd love to hear how the amplifier, how people are taking this and understanding it. So thank you everybody for being here live and have a great month. We'll see you soon.